Hi, welcome to my FSY. This is a level 2 energy practice during which we're going to look at grounding the feet, the grounding actions of the feet, and rebalancing the pelvis. And we'll see how those two things interrelate. How getting clearer contact with your feet on the ground helps the pelvic bowl to rest more easily on the legs. And the hope is that when your legs and your pelvis are more aligned that way, that you'll start to feel you have more energy available to you, because so much energy that we usually waste trying to hold the body in this sort of out of balance way is not serving us. So begin standing at the top of your mat with your feet hips width apart. Make sure that your toes are aimed straight forward. Make sure the outer edges of your feet are parallel to each other. And then just bring your hands to your pelvic bowl. Begin to spill it forward into an easy forward bend. Now you're welcome to bend your knees. Our model today, Heather, doesn't necessarily need to because her hamstrings are pretty loose. But if you're feeling stiff in the beginning of the practice, please bend your knees. The key point is that I want you to bring your thumbs to the mounds of your big toes. Notice, they're not the big toes themselves that she's putting her thumbs on, but this ball knuckle joint. We'll call that the mound of the big toe. And with your thumbnails, or thumbs, I should say, just start to push those points down into the ground. And you want to feel a good, clear press of the bones hitting the ground. Good. And then splay your other fingers out wide and try to wrap the fingers around to the outer heels. Again, you can see that she's pressing with her fingertips, the other fingertips, the outer edge of the heels of her feet. And so you begin to stroke the outer heels down toward the ground and just feel like the outer heel bone is making better contact with the ground. Now, if you have long enough fingers, this would be the ideal, as Heather does right now. You want to get the mounds of your big toes grounding and the outer heels grounding. Yes, and spontaneously, when those two diagonal points on the feet, when they are grounded or making better contact with ground, you'll notice that the arches of your feet have a lift to them. They have a shape to them. And that's indicative of the feet working well. The ankles will start to balance themselves right on top of the feet. And all the way up to the knees and to the hips. So she might already be feeling that with her feet well balanced on the ground, her pelvis is able to spill itself a little farther down into a forward bend. Good. And then you can bend your knees and walk yourself back to a downward facing dog pose. Haven't mentioned breathing yet. But always, 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 one of our most important principles is just keep letting your breath flow freely. Don't try to force it. Certainly don't hold it. Just let it move and let it accommodate itself to the needs of the pose. So in your downward facing dog, push down in the mounds of your big toes. And at the same time, stretch your outer heels toward the floor. Now, they don't have to touch, remember, but just go in that direction. When you're looking back at your feet, see the arches. And notice how, once more, the lift of the arches of your feet, gives a little lift to your pelvis. It's as though the pelvis were the lollipop sort of coming unstuck off the stick. Good. And then bend your knees, walk your feet forward all the way to the top of your mat. Still have your feet hips width apart. Good. And then you just put your hands on the back of your pelvis and with your hands push down on the tailbone to come up. Down to come up. Now bend your knees for a shallow, powerful pose. And you're going to put your hands on the inside edges of your knees to start. So this is a little isometric, meaning nothing's actually moving, but inside you'll be able to feel something happening. With your hands, you try to pry the knees apart, but with your inner thigh muscles, you try to push the knees together. And you'll feel a little bit of confusion as that happens, because you're kind of doing opposite things with your legs. Just notice that within this stalemate, the mounds of your big toes become strong and grounded. Good. We'll try the other one. Put the hands on the outsides of the knees. With your hands, now you're going to try to push the knees toward each other, and yet resist that. Resist that by pushing the knees into the hands. Again, it's a deliberate stalemate. You'll feel your legs starting to vibrate. You'll feel your outer heels becoming more prominent in the ground. Good. Okay, and then take standing forward bend. Just straighten your legs, fold down. If your fingers can go in line with your toes, then that's sort of convenient, but don't force. Just breathe. That's it. Just breathe. And without making a big deal about it, just keep feeling this thread we're weaving together. The mounds of your big toes and your outer heels. That's it. And the arches of the feet having some shapeliness. All the way up to your pelvis. So what's happening in your feet starts to almost reverberate up your legs into your pelvis. And you always know you're on the right track when there's more freedom. In this case, more freedom for the pelvis to freely tip toward heart and head. Good. So she'll bend the knees and go ahead and walk your feet back to downward facing dog pose again. Good old downward facing. This time, lift the heels a few inches up away from the floor so that you can get even clear on the mounds of your big toes pushing down and down. That's it. Then as you start to stretch your heels back down to the ground, lead with your outer heels. Lead with your outer heels as though the arches, as though you're literally almost standing on two tennis balls, that the arches of your feet got even domier. Do that one more time. Lift heels a little bit up. Push the mounds of your big toes down. As you stretch your heels back down to the ground, think outer heels and outer heels. And again, notice the effect going on your pelvis. There should be a little lightness in the pelvis. Good. Bend your knees, walk your feet forward to the top of your mat. Standing forward bend for a moment. Let's make sure the feet are hips width apart. Give yourself time to breathe. Then, as you inhale, bend your knees, lift your torso and arms up for the powerful pose. One last time. Obviously, this is a wonderful strength pose. And yet when we do it in this specific way, feeling the mounds of the big toes and the outer heels, you start to feel the freedom of energy that you have as your pelvis unlocks itself from the thighs. Good. So it's 3 breaths. It's strong feet. It's a free pelvis that could tip in any direction because it's able to move. Good. And it's a long spine. Beautiful. Okay. And then fold down again. Standing forward bend. Good work. Nice. Okay. So you're going to walk your feet back to downward facing dog. The whole idea of repeating poses continually is that you start to notice little transformations that are happening from the feet through the legs to the pelvis, which remember we're trying to get to be more balanced. Nice. Okay, so from downward dog, put your knees all the way down to the ground. You come onto all fours for a moment. Then bring the inner knees all the way together. And from that position, put your left knee all the way behind your right knee. And open your feet out wide to the side. So this one's called Gomukhasana, the cow-faced pose. Knees together, the feet wide, and you start to sit back between your feet. Yeah. Good. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of our sequence today, right? But if you find that the ground is very far away from your pelvis, then it's worth sitting on a block. Don't strain. That's one of our key principles as well. Don't strain to be in any of these positions. So you find yourself in this cross-legged position, and you just want to start to fold forward any amount that you can do from your pelvis. From your pelvis. Good. Come back up one more time, Heather, and we'll just show what would be the quote-unquote wrong way to do it would be to just drop your chin and round your spine. And this is sort of a collapsed forward bend. Come back up. Lengthen your spine. That's it. And then do it from the pelvis. So it's, yes, she's rounding forward, but it's elongated. Elongated forward bend. And she's making this one look very easy. For me, this was like a 5-year project. My hips were so very tight, very resistant to this shape. But what we all find, whether we're more experienced in it or whether we're just newer to it, is that the exhales tend to bring a softening. Almost like the outer hips, instead of being sedimentary rock, they become more clay-like in texture. That's it. One more time. Good. Okay. And then you can walk your hands back and come on up. And then I like to lean back so that I can rock forward. Yeah, and come onto all fours. So you change the cross of your legs. In this case, it would be the right knee behind the left knee. The feet out wide to the side. And same thing, just settling back. Back, toward the block, toward the ground. Remember, a blanket is somewhere between block and ground. And then you insert a pause, just so that the forward bend isn't a claustrophobic collapse, but an elongated movement from the hips. From the bowl of the pelvis tipping forward. Now you might find in your own body, right, you're like, wow, I see what you mean in theory, but the bowl is not really moving a whole lot. Don't undervalue the power of intention and the direction of movement. So it's not so important the range of movement. Like we said, Heather's able to fold quite a bit, but the intention and the direction of movement is really maximally important. Furthermore, when you let yourself breathe in these shapes, when you can at least tune into the exhales, you'll start to feel that there is some sense of that softening. Good. And well done. Now, same thing. You walk your hands back to come up. You lean back just a little bit in order to roll forward onto all fours. And you come into downward dog, one of our favorite poses of all time. To notice the effects of that hip opener on the pose. Tying it all together now. Feel the mounds of your big toes. Stretch your outer heels toward the floor. You almost want to fluff your outer hips, like when you're trying to fluff your down pillow. It's like to fluff the outer hips. Fluff the outer hips. Be strong in your feet. And notice if the pelvis can tip just a little bit more toward the heart and head. Beautiful. Good. From here, exhale, step your right foot forward to a lunge. She'll begin to straighten her front leg. And then rebend the front leg. Now, if you don't have a whole lot of flexibility in your legs, you'd benefit by doing this exercise with blocks, as we're demonstrating here. But the main point is, at least 5 times, go back and forth between straightening your leg and bending your leg. Straightening and bending. And if you just keep letting your breath move as you do that, I guarantee there'll be some organic rhythm that begins to happen. Some way that it seems like the leg would preferably want to unravel. Good. Now, next time you get the leg straight, you'll keep it straight. And this is where it gets a little confusing. Walk your right foot 6 inches to the left, and then walk your left foot 6 inches to the right. So you've made the legs deliberately cattywampus. Okay? Just to position the feet in this way, you notice the front leg might have gotten bent, so take another moment to straighten it. Then I want you to feel down into your feet. Feel for the mound of that right big toe like you did at the very beginning of this little practice. Feel how that helps to stabilize your front foot. Then feel into the outer right heel of your right foot. And notice how that makes a little bit of space around your right hip. It's as though the thigh starts to slide a little bit over to the right. You know you're on the right track there when it feels like the breath falls into your belly. It's got a little more space. So you give that as much time as you need. For some of us, this is a really intense stretch, especially if you're a runner, someone who uses their legs quite repetitively in action. So you give it time. Then to take it a notch further, she'll leave the left hand down on the block or the ground and take your right shoulder and arm to the sky. So it's a variation on the revolved triangle pose, specifically feeling the feet. The mound of the right big toe grounding, that stabilizes you. The outer edge of the right heel grounding, that gives space for the pelvis. That's it. And then you turn the belly and chest to the sky. Wonderful. Wonderful. And release. Good. Both hands to blocks. Then rewrite your feet. Right foot right. Left foot left. And then you can temporarily remove your blocks and go back to downward facing dog pose. Down dog. How many times have we done now? 6, 7 times in this practice. Can you notice the progression of it? Notice also the difference between the right and left sides of your pelvis. Sometimes the right one will feel like almost like well-lubricated Rubik's Cube. It can turn easily. And the left one will feel a little stickier. And obviously we're going for balance. On your exhalation, step left foot forward to lunge. Slowly start to straighten that front leg. Decide for yourself if you need blocks. I think we'll use them just since we have them. And that makes it easier. We're for ease and economized effort. And that's where the breath comes back and forth into it too, isn't it? You breathe as you bend and straighten your leg. You breathe as you disentangle that leg. Each time you straighten the leg, you'll already notice that the mound of the big toe comes a little uprooted. So you might note that and reground that. Good. And the next time you get the leg straight, keep it straight. Good. So it's a little finagling. Inchworm your left foot over to the right and your right foot over to the left. So again, deliberate cattywampus with the legs. Yes. And then as though you had that same thumb from the beginning of practice, as though you could thumbtack the mound of your left big toe to the ground, you give it some pressure. You feel the straightness without being locked in your left knee. Good. Begin to push a little more weight in your outer left heel. And you'll feel a little more space start to emerge in and around your left hip. So again, it's the quality of contact with the ground, contact with the ground that reverberates through your leg into your pelvis. Keeping your right hand on the block or the ground, you take your left shoulder and arm up to the sky. Don't overdo at the level of your neck. Don't overdo or force the twist in your shoulders. Just keep feeling that foot talking to the hip. While your belly starts to turn. Yeah, that's it. Turn and open. Wonderful. Good. Release. Hands down to the ground. We'll remove the blocks. Back to downward facing dog pose. Good old downward facing. Ground the mounds of your big toes. Stretch your outer heels down. And lift the arches of your feet all the way up into the big hot air balloon of your pelvis. So it feels floating, feels light and free. Beautiful. Walk your feet forward. Come all the way to the top of your mat for standing forward bend. You feel how far we've come. Strong, rooted feet. Free, balanced pelvis. It's free, free to the thing. And together with your breath, it feels like it yields a sort of a soft neck. Quiet mind. And you conclude this mini practice in standing mountain pose. So if you bring your hands to the back of your pelvis and push down on your tail to come up. Sometimes we do mountain pose with the feet together. For now, let's leave them hips width apart. And at a certain point, you just leave all the postural cues that you've been given. In other words, you don't try to make them happen. Instead, you feel their effects. The alertness of the feet. Freedom of the pelvis. And overall, this whole sense of having more energy available to you. More energy. Not because you've ingested something, some caffeine or stimulant, but just because you've reappropriated the energy in your body into a more favorable way. Thank you very much for practicing with us. See you next time.